going to get started, everybody. If we could take our seats, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll just wait for this deck to get up and get started. Okay, morning, everybody. Appreciate everybody being here. Just want to kick off with some opening remarks. As Governor Abbott and the legislative leaders that created this task force prioritized, I think it's important to remind everybody that we're here because of a shared commitment, which is helping parents and families access quality, affordable early child care and education. Two quick piece of business before we've got to go over the agenda and objectives and do some recap. Closing the loop on July. Appreciate everybody's feedback on the survey and otherwise, and some of the working sessions between the July meeting and now. I think they helped all of us, but definitely helped me on a couple things. One that finding a way or a summarized recommendation for the legislature that will kick off regarding governance and finding the best pathway forward to create a governance system that's more efficient and effective than it is today, by bringing together key programs, funding streams, and regulatory bodies, so that all key stakeholders have a more streamlined system to deal with and to service them. I think there is a lot of unity growing in that fact. There obviously is continued conversation and debate around how and when that happens. But at some level, our group's responsibility is to make the best recommendation and then allow the legislature to inform and develop exactly how and when that gets done. But I think it's really good that we have a pretty strong consensus that there is opportunity for consolidation and improvement in the system that has a lot of logic and straight line pathway there. Regarding that, today is not a decision day on that. We still need to have good conversation, hear from key stakeholders, listen to some research and some public sentiment, and we will have time in executive session after lunch to have further conversation about that and all of our other key priorities: quality, access, affordability, data, systems. So we'll have time to do that, but again, today's not a decision day. The objectives for today are to summarize and examine meeting inputs and national models for governance, present key task force takeaways on statewide governance, focused on a unified structure with a single accountable leader, to learn how other states have optimized. Oh, this is the July one. This is the July objectives. Let's say it's again. That was from July, right? Huh? Yeah. We're not going to do that again. That sounds boring. Today, really, the focus is to hear from. We're going to do a national panel, which will be really nice to continue to hear from other states, Ohio, North Carolina, and others. Some of you all have already seen Texas 2036's report. We're going to get a readout on that. We're going to hear from Early Matters. And we're also going to, which was good, we had the working session that Nancy brought up regarding the local workforce boards. We're going to talk a bit about how the state currently functions with each regulatory body trying to work together to execute on a childcare system, federal, state, and local levels. So it was nice to have that interim working session, hear some about that. And then that should conclude most of our testimony today. And then executive session, like I said, we'll go over further discuss consolidation models and raise up other priorities or discussion items for our other priorities: affordability, access, data, and quality. So are there any opening questions, concerns, or conversation topics before we get to public testimony?
Yeah, I thought our last group working meeting was very helpful. Very good help. I answered a lot of questions and begin to bring stuff together. I want to say thank you. I thought that was
Good. Before we get to public testimony, just a couple of items. You want to go to the survey or draft takeaways? Which one, Shannon?
Well, here you have just some areas where members agreed on. There was again a lot of consensus on the last survey, as well as some questions that were raised. And what came up multiple times was keeping in mind the needs of both rural and urban communities in our recommendations.
One thing that I think is a good reminder that has really been top of mind for me is that rightfully so much of our focus and data analysis and prioritization has been on the families and the governance systems that include public funding. But I do think it's important for context. Shannon has it up here in kind of the mixed delivery system that we have in place. I think that's really critical as we focus on our key priorities on not only what are the potential recommendations or changes that could be made that would affect the roughly 500,000 children that are in some sort of publicly funded or publicly governed system. But a reminder is that roughly makes up 25% or less of the kids 0 to 5 in Texas. So I think it's really important as we walk through our priorities to see on what changes or improvements could be recommended that would not only be focused on that cohort, but could have either direct or indirect positive impact on the entire ecosystem. Understandably so, the 75%, roughly 1.8 million children that are served by our quote mixed delivery system, which is in-home, private care, faith-based care, friends and family care, that is still in scope for us, and that I do think we have opportunities in our prioritized categories to recommend changes or improvements that would have positive impact on the entire population. So I do think that's good for us to keep in mind. Sometimes I get lost in the detail of the most controllable cohort is the 500,000 or so that is in the public governed space, and it needs our attention. However, I think it's important that we keep the entire population in mind because that is our charge.
one question. Something you said as we start looking at potential consolidation or whatever we do. Mm-hmm. What kind of feedback have you received or direction? Given the governor's his proclamation out to everyone, sure, saying, "Hey, we need everybody to cut back 3%."
Sure.
Inherently in this, I hope we can find at least 3% or more of overlap or efficiencies that might save some of that down the road. Have you had any feedback at all how that might impact what we're doing?
Yeah, I think it's a good call out. I think a couple of things. I think a consolidation recommendation does align potentially with budget constraints. Having said that, we've all seen the spaghetti map. it is very challenging without a really focused effort and a really deep dive data analysis project to act for us and our time and expertise and project management resources to actually identify what that could mean in a dollars and cents or percentages standpoint. Luckily, I think the feedback that we've gotten from whether it's the comptroller's office or the governor's office or policymaking is that is not our job. And that if the logic aligns to budget constraints and that they can, there could be both positive impact on the key stakeholders with consolidation and potential savings. The potential savings part should be identified, but getting into the dollars and cents, that doesn't need that's not a necessary function of the task force. So I think that, and that there was pretty specific requests that our recommendation should be precise, but there should be allowable nature for the House and Senate committees to take our recommendations and potentially get our feedback or advice on how to execute, but allow them to craft the path forward in the legislature. What else to recap, Shannon?
Just the emerging consensus from task force members, which you've already sort of touched on, chairs. There is unanimity around consolidated government structure. As you've mentioned, there's more work to be done. Making decisions or making recommendations about what that looks like fully. This is a sort of a summary of the feedback that we've heard from members on consolidation and its merits. This is something the members have seen, but hasn't been shared thus far in the meeting. And then we have a brief sort of quick overview of state local coordination, which we can do now or after invited testimony.
Let's do that.
Okay.
Any comments or questions on either and conversation? So the discussion. Yeah.
One thing that came out yesterday in our call, what obviously just the data, I thought was an innocent question and asking workforce board, what is it they input? And there's so many different ancillary systems that they have. I think it'd be a fair question to each agency instead of the one master big one that I hope we could. What other ancillary systems are they putting in? And that leads to the next question. If we could, we might not be able to consolidate it as part of the, maybe we could get that inventory to present whomever's going to do this or lead this. Who owns it? What software system is it? What exactly do they use it for? And is it exclusive to this program, or is it used for other programs within that agency? Yeah, you could probably ask a lot of derivative questions off of that, but that kind of stood out to me yesterday.
Yeah, as I understand it, Jeff, that that's part of the ECE project that
be the
exists in some form or fashion as the kind of exploratory template of what is in scope for either consolidation or sharing, information sharing.
So potentially that system would be all inclusive, and those other ones could potentially go away or import that data.
Based on my understanding of the ECID's presentation and the information that I've read, is that to your point, I don't know. I don't that what's in scope and what's not in scope, but at least that exploratory process was done to show, hey, here are the various data sources, inputs, where they sit, and what is in scope of ECIDs to enhance the data quality, accuracy, timeliness, and sharing, or consolidation or sharing.
Chairman.
And just a.
Yeah, Monica, please.
If I could, I think the part that we don't know is that right now, the data systems exist at each agency, and ECE is pulling that existing data into a consolidated location. It is not replacing those systems. So for example, within TEA, TSDS-Peds, which is where we get all of our data, that would continue to exist because it collects data on all the way through high school students. I can't speak for the other agencies, but if they have other data that is not related to what would be represented in ECEs, then those systems might also need to continue to exist.
Just a quick note, on the request that we sent to the agencies, there was a question about that and they answered it in the share file. I know that folks, it's a lot of information. I know that folks have not had a chance to look at it.
Thanks.
We could do it deeply.
Thank you.
Any other questions or thoughts? Okay. I think we're ready for a vote testimony. Invite your testimony. Charles going to be in person or on Zoom?
Yes, Charles is here.
Okay, great. We can do roll call. We need to do roll call.
Yes, we have not done roll call.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
give me 1 second.
We waited just for you, Nancy, to do roll call.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Here, Peter Holt,
Here.
Reagan Coran, here, Dr. Tracy Hansen, Leslie Callahan, here, Lori Charney, here, Maricela Naga, here, Dr. Jennifer Stockman,
Here.
Jeff Austin III, here, Jay Puckett,
Here.
Brent Coates,
Here.
Nancy Swindon.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to start by testimony with Charles Miller from Texas 2036. We've heard once from Texas 2036, but they now have finalized their report that includes a statewide survey of parents and other information that they've gathered to focus or provide some information on the state of childcare, early child education in Texas. Charles?
Well, thank you so much for the time to talk to you all today. Charles Miller, Director of Mobility for Texas 2036. For those who are not aware, we are a think and do tank focused on making sure that Texas remains the best place to live, work, and raise a family by our bicentennial. So let's talk about what it is as well. So we put out a report recently, and it's 67 pages. I won't blame you if you don't read the whole thing. But we combined a lot of publicly available data with a lot of original research. So what we did is we went out and surveyed 975 parents. This is a hard population to reach. When you talk about normal surveys, we do a lot of voter polls at Texas 2036. And usually in those voter polls, it's a really small subset, under 10% that are actually parents. So we were very intentional on making sure that the survey went after parents of children under 6 across the spectrum. So those who were using full-time care, those who were taking care of the kids at home, across the spectrum, we get a full list of things. A lot of times what happens when you do a survey is you have scripted questions and you get the answers back, and you sometimes get more questions than you get answers from that. And you want to follow up and find out what was going on. What did that mean? So we followed that up with some focus groups. We did 11 of these around the state, diverse geography, and we're able to talk to about 120 folks in real life and really go into deep dive to what some of those answers might be. So if there's something in there that didn't quite make sense, but take a little. And then we did follow that up with a statewide voter poll and asked what voters think about these issues, because just as important as what folks who are experiencing this is this issue of what is politically viable. What are the voters going to support? What are they going to tolerate? What are they not going to support? And that matters for what it is that we learn. One of the really, really interesting things that we found is that issues around childcare are making impacts on how many kids parents want to have. And I want to put some context around this. So over half of Texas parents say that childcare costs are impacting their decision to have more kids. What's really interesting about this number is the subset that we're talking to. We're not talking to all Texans. We're not talking to all adults. We're talking to new parents. These are people who have already chosen to have children and for whom having children is important to them. And over half of them are saying that childcare is one of the issues why they're not doing this. That's a really, really big issue, we think. I'm going to do a little bit of a cross topic here. I talked in the Public Health Committee last week about the coming demographic challenges that we're going to have with long-term care. And this is what happens when our elderly population, the ratio of that to our working age population, stops being that pyramid where we have a lot of people at that lower level who are supporting a relatively smaller number up there and starts becoming a straight line. And now that ratio can, when the folks who are inclined to already have kids are saying that they don't want to have kids, that creates demographic challenges down the road. We want to stop what is a current challenge for the next 20 years from being a catastrophe in 40, 50. We need to figure out this issue. I want to echo something that Adrian mentioned earlier, and this is that the scope of this issue goes well beyond just the publicly funded programs. About 1 in 6 kids under the age of 6 are touched or enrolled in one of these programs publicly funded, which means that 5 out of 6 children are not. And so when we talk about what is the mission, what is the objective or the purpose in the state of how to impact this issue for all Texans, we need to be thinking well beyond just the publicly funded spots and thinking about the broader regulatory environment, the availability, what are the market conditions, what's out there. And that goes well beyond what is a common focus of just that publicly funded spot. So I think that scope point is very well taken. I really want to urge how important that is. The bulk of parents are not hit by those publicly funded programs. If we want to hit the bulk of them, we need to go well beyond just those publicly funded. Parents are making trade-offs in this space all the time. I don't think that's a surprise. We hear about the challenges that are being had all the time. We hear about parents that are making trade-offs between cost and quality. We hear about parents that are making trade-offs between quality and availability. And as I'll get into in a little bit, we think parents are in the best place to make those trade-offs. Parental needs are diverse. They're changing all the time. And if anybody is going to have to manage those trade-offs, because that is how reality works, we think that parents are in the best position to figure out what that is. And not everything can be perfect. It's unfortunate, but we don't want to let perfect be the enemy of the good. So as those trade-offs are being managed, we think that it's very important that parents are put in the position to be able to do. So this is what I was talking about in terms of parental needs are diverse. The first way that they're diverse is they change over time. And the same family, as their children age through the system, are choosing different environments for how to manage the early care and early education of them. It is largely a predictable shift of early or later on in the case, education, pre-K, more formal educational environments are more important. This makes sense as they're approaching the more formal educational space, entering kindergarten. That aspect becomes more important. Earlier on, more families are choosing to take care of the children at home, utilizing a friend, mentor, neighbor, and center-based care. That formal center-based care peaks at around age 2 statewide. But these needs do change over time. This is not an issue only of different families, say at different areas of the income spectrum or different areas of the state choosing different things. The same family over time is making different decisions. But it is also that different areas of the state have different needs. And so one of the striking things we found was just the wide discrepancy in care settings that were chosen, say in San Antonio compared to Amarillo. And in San Antonio, there is a much, much higher concentration of families that were using informal settings, friend, family, and neighbor care, and far fewer use of that formal, fully licensed full-time center. In Amarillo, it was the opposite. The formal full-time center was the most popular version of care. We don't know exactly why this is. We didn't have enough data to prove this out, but we do have a theory. So I want to share that theory with you. And some of that is in this concept of what we would call rootedness, or the fact that we've had economic success leading to mobility. And families who are new to an area are less likely to have those friend, family, and neighbor connections that they're able to call on. And so as an area experiences an economic boom, its formal structures for care may be called on more than areas that have a longer term rootedness, communities that have been around long. And this is important because there are all kinds of cultural views about who should bear this responsibility. Should it be a formal setting? Should it be the state? Should it be the family? And what we see is that this is different based on what the local community feels. Some communities have those long, deep connections and can offer that friend, family, and neighbor care at a higher level, and some communities don't. And in part, that may be because of their recent economic success. And so we need to be clear that we are able to adapt to those different needs in those communities based on what's happening in different areas. Some other points, providers right now are under strain. You have heard about this. We found this also. The wages are below retail, so they struggle with the workforce. There are some recommendations in this report about how we might deal with it. But one of the things that I really want to highlight here is this kind of own goal that we have in the way that we regulate childcare. So one of the issues that we heard from providers was around liability insurance. The state has recently taken efforts to address this. It reduced the amount of liability insurance that providers had to carry totally. One of the things that we think might be a win-win for everybody is to make sure that when we have safety violations, safety regulations, that they are only about safety and that we are not laundering quality into safety. Because when that happens, if there is a safety violation or a safety regulation flag that goes on there, a liability insurer is going to look at that and say, oh, well, your record is dinged, your safety is lower, and so we are now going to ding you. We should be very clear about what is safety and what is quality. Keep those two separate so that our providers are not having higher premiums simply because they might be perfectly safe, but didn't meet a particular quality standard that we're setting. So these are two different objectives. We should make sure that our regulatory standards keep them. And again, it's also the economic part. And we've seen this. We ran our own economic analysis and it came out pretty close to some of the others. We were intentionally more conservative so that we felt very solid in this number, but around $8 billion a year is the impact of parents making different choices around childcare. So that's some good data in there about the number of parents that turned down a promotion, turned down a job, left the job altogether, or just missed work. And the impact is real. The challenges that they're facing are having these economic impacts. And so while it is having that personal economic impact on the family itself, it is also a broader story of economic impact around it. So collectively, we think that really, and we've highlighted this earlier, these issues are going to require structural remedies. I'm going to call out 3 here. Our report has 8. Some of them are kind of in the weed, but these are the big ones. Unified governance. I was happy and thrilled to see that this appears to be a growing consensus around here, but it is really hugely important. When we have all of these different agencies that are doing different things and having different missions, families don't know where to turn. They don't know who they have to go to get the right information. They can't figure out, okay, do I go here for checking on safety and then I go here for checking on quality, here for this potential subsidy, but then there's also this other subsidy over here. They are left entirely confused about what to do. And that confusion, as much as, say, the direct cost or availability, is sometimes in and of itself its own barrier. We need to get the regulatory mission right. So this is what I arced on. The regulatory mission is what covers all of the children. And we need to make sure that that regulatory mission is serving the diverse needs of parents. We need to make sure there is a clear safety baseline. And then we need to make sure that beyond that, that parents have the freedom and choice to choose the care that they need for their children, and that the providers are free to respond to those parental needs they are seeing in the market. Parents want after-hours care, it needs to be able to be done. If parents are wanting more care in dense urban areas, our regulatory structure should adapt to that. One of the examples I'll give is that there is a requirement for outdoor space that is confined and fenced in, and that number is higher than almost every other state in the country, and it does not make allowances for denser urban areas where that may not be realistic. And as a result, it is much harder for care to be offered in those areas than it needs to be, even if parents would be okay with choosing care scenarios in that setting. Those are choices that our parents are choosing about where to work and live, and the care should be able to respond to where parents would want to have that care delivered. We need to look hard at this. The best way to do that is to make sure that all all of the different objectives are housed under one roof, so those trade-offs, those regulatory trade-offs can be made by a single entity. And there are not siloed missions that are hyper-focused on one thing and only accountable for one aspect of that mission. If the goal is to provide safety and affordability and quality, there are trade-offs that are going to be made. And if you only are calling, or if you're calling 3 different people and one of them will says, well, I'm only responsible for safety, and the only way that I can get in trouble is if there's any safety violation, we are going to see those regulations go out of whack compared to the other objectives that we have. So you have to unify under one roof in order to make sure that we get that regulatory mission correct. Similarly, if we just had an affordability person who isn't able to go and figure out how can we make things the most affordable possible, we would probably be having issues with our safety regulations and they would not be appropriately balanced. These are trade-offs that need to be made, and they need to be made under one. And the last part is, how do we do this? We've got to build that data infrastructure. We need to make sure that we have the appropriate information that we have to respond to that. We have a good start with ECE. We need to build on that infrastructure, make sure that that is appropriately funded, and that our policymakers and regulators have the information they need to make those appropriate choices. We've got roughly, and this is a bit of an estimate, about 330,000 licensed seats that are currently going unfilled. And yet we also are hearing from parents all the time that they're having trouble finding it. There's a bit of a mismatch going on there, and we need better data to be able to solve. Lastly, I'll close. The voters think this is an important issue, and it's nonpartisan. We have high majorities who think that it's important to this issue, right? So I just want to leave that with you as you guys are considering and thinking about this, that the voters are dependent on. Thank you.
I'd like to make a comment on the seats available versus filled seats. So as an owner, I'm licensed for 236 kids. I've now down to 55 kiddos. I have seats available, and so if I take my number with what my license capacity is, there's my seats available. But I cannot find staff who work, enough staff to work for $14 an hour to be able to put somebody in that classroom so that I can fill those seats. So that's a lot of where that discrepancy is. So just for my friends on the task force, just so you can kind of understand it from my side, that's where that, a lot of that gap.
What I would say also is that when I say we have an estimate of how many licensed seats are filled. We don't have an estimate of how many actually staffed or served seats are available at any given. We don't know. There may be some local folks who have a better idea in micro areas, but at the statewide level, we really don't know where the supply and demand of actual available capacity is, for basically the reasons you described.
Would you mind going back to one of this trade-off slide? Yeah. The first couple. I thought that was interesting. And did y'all have any breakdown? You heard our discussion earlier about rural versus urban. Any breakdown or insights into are they pretty much the same, or is there any discrepancy? And then the same with the pay, rural versus urban.
So on the pay, there are different pay rates for market rates. Right now, some of the best indications that we have on that are still growing. The data that we have, there is a new data tool, and I forget the acronym for it, that is starting to grow enough information. But what we can see kind of at a granular level is there are pay discrepancies, urban, rural, and they're along the lines that you would expect. In terms of the factors that parents are weighing and the trade-offs that are being made, we didn't have a large enough number to get granular on that with confidence, unfortunately. We did see that there are different decisions being made, but when we talk about what is it that is driving, when you make that trade-off, what is it that you're prioritizing, it was hard to get some of those granular cost tabs to the number of power we had in our system.
It's going to be tough because whatever the final recommendation is, that it doesn't favor in one direction or the other, that you're penalized or overly incented for living in different areas, but it's a real discrepancy. So how do we find that? I was looking for insight for sure.
I can give a little insight just from my area. My facility pays a whole lot more than that, but we're still in competition because Bucky's down the street pays a whole lot more than that retail number two. So if we had a global perspective, I suspect it kind of ebbs and flows based on the area the center is located.
Tracy knows a good friend of mine is in the insurance business. And just looking at insurance costs, if you kind of look at this liability, well, liability is going to be a higher, also another correlation with where the facility is. Are you on the coast in a hurricane or wind area? Are you going to be in the Metroplex, Northeast Texas or North Texas? And there's a high degree of hail damage and other natural disasters. You know, those are things, but I was glad to see the governor ask TDI to help bring down insurance costs. But that's going to be, those are just other factors that tie into the cost that's the provider's going to have to put forth. So.
Yeah, the provider on costs like that, the providers really don't have an option to adjust that. And it's a little bit outside of what we would traditionally think of as this early ed space, but it is a broader issue. And it's not just childcare providers that are facing it. It is homeowners, businesses around the state who are possibly injured.
And scary fact is that childcare centers can opt out of carrying insurance as long as they let the parents know. So there are centers out there without insurance, but that's the only way they keep their doors open.
You raised attention where the affordability today is impacting both family planning decisions, but also, decisions about whether you can afford to go back to work. You also then raised the labor cost issue right now, and Tracy cited a situation where licensed seats aren't really truly available seats because we can't attract people into the jobs with the current wage levels. Did your report contemplate any recommendations around how to solve that dilemma?
So this is a really sticky wicket, and it's a hard problem to solve because the issue is, on the one hand, how do we solve the issue of not being able to find enough staff? Traditionally, the response is we pay more wages. But that then runs into the affordability problem because wages are directly going to increase your underlying costs and your underlying tuition. What we are proposing is there may be a possible way out. This is not a perfect idea, but this is one of the creative solutions that we have. And this would get into this concept of, can we reduce the amount of turnover that we see, thereby keeping folks who are in their job longer by making this part of a career? Part of a career ladder. And so that the child care workforce could come in temporarily for a period of years. And when we know that the turnover is already much, much lower than that, increasing that for a period of time could enable that model that would allow for relatively lower wages temporarily compared to overall baseline, but still keeping more people in those jobs for longer. That's not a perfect solution, and there is no perfect solution to this problem.
I'm a little confused. Can you explain that in a little bit different way? I didn't understand that.
So if the idea is, we heard from a lot of providers that their turnover of their workforce was incredibly rapid. And I had experiences with this as a parent myself. Our child, when we were at a relatively nice childcare here in Austin, workers would come and go. Oftentimes they'd be there a month and they'd go out. If we had somebody who was there 6 months, this was great. And when we would talk to the providers around the state as part of the survey, we kind of heard the same thing. The average turnover is very short. Do you have a number in your head of how long the average tenure of worker is?
Less than a year.
So if we are able to increase that period of 1 or 2 years, which is a earn while you learn, or for lack of a better term, an apprentice model, that is part of a pathway to a ongoing educational career path, that might be able to increase the length of tenure, increasing the number of people in the workforce without having to dramatically increase the wages that would then create the affordability problem. It's a proposal. It has not been proven anywhere. We do not have data that this is out there. There are a couple of efforts around the state that are trying this out right now. And what we proposed was watching them and seeing how they work.
Do you have a list of the people who are trying this?
In the report, I believe it is noted off the top of my head. I don't have it at all.
Just following the conversation a little here. For other folks that are trying this model, do we know how they're funding it? Is it funded by private entities, public entities? Is it kind of a collective of different providers, or how are I know we can develop a model, but you have to have the funding that goes with the model. So just curious to see if folks have tried things or any ideas there.
Because we don't know if it even works yet, I'd be remiss to say we've got the funding figured out. Probably there's going to be some sort of a private-public partnership process or something, but we don't have a specific recommendation on the funding because, yeah, this is.
I just was curious to see if there was a couple of different primary ideas or concepts statewide and they're trying different things. I just would be interested to kind of.
San Antonio did one and it was funded by United Way. They did a 2-year project. I don't have an update on that, but they offered, I believe it was $18 an hour. So they bridged the gap, $4 from the average childcare to see, and their goals were to view outcomes for turnover and outcomes for centers. Were they able to have service for children? Were they able to achieve any objective goals they had, like we were going up with the TRS system, various objective goals. I don't, they didn't have any long-term endowment funding for it. It was a 2-year trial.
So I can add that Texas Workforce Commission has funded apprenticeship programs we did during the pandemic. We sort of had some regional tries at it. And we currently fund scholarships that include folks who are in a registered apprenticeship program. We're paying for the training portion of their apprenticeship classroom training, as well as for mentoring support at the child care provider. If you have like a lead teacher that is their mentor who would help pay, give them a stipend. One of the challenges with the apprenticeship model, though, in childcare that we have found, and the workforce agency, we have an apprenticeship program, is that the traditional model is that the employer is paying for those wage increases, and that does not work in the childcare space. And so you have to have funding to fund those pay increases for those folks. But we do, with our scholarship program, tie it to retention, that if they accept the scholarship, they're required to stay. And basically the more training, the bigger the credential, the bigger time commitment they're making. So it is a strategy, can be very effective for staff retention if they're wanting to pursue that field.
Just really quickly, at least at the state level, when I was early in my career, there was a trade-off with the agency where they would support your tuition and books, but the agreement was you had to stay with that agency for a certain amount of time. And so that was the trade-off. And so again, it's perfect, but just wanting to know, again, trying to take some of that lift off the providers a little bit, just trying to think a little bit more creatively around that trade-off. And I know that when I was there, and again, this has been many years ago, it was a really nice incentive. And a lot of us that were younger were talking a lot about what the benefits to that, and that they actually did attract quite a few people to stay longer than they would have.
There's a clawback to it.
Yes, if you leave, you have to pay it back.
Yes.
And it's an actual contract that you sign.
You mentioned that this situation as it exists today costs the state $8 billion in economic value annually. Should we as a state have a mindset around return on investment and be willing to put more money into this, or should we continue to think about this as a cost?
So I think there's two ways of looking at this. One, the first one is the regulatory issue. And there is no real cost there. I mean, the cost is de minimis in terms of data infrastructure, understanding the rules of the regulator. When we talk about what the state is investing, so when the state is spending money on this, our general baseline position is that it should be done in accordance with the voters' wishes. We polled on this earlier this year as part of that voter poll that I mentioned. And generally speaking, the voters favor what we would call an educational framework, which is If you look at, do you think that the primary purpose of when the state sends us money, should it be to get kids ready for kindergarten, or should the primary purpose be to enable parents to participate in the workforce? The voters prefer the educational mission, and that was pretty consistent across party lines in most areas of the state. We are running another voter poll right now. We hope to have those answers out in late September, early October, where we're retesting this just to make sure how resilient that answer was. But our general theory is that when the state is investing that money, it should be investing it in accordance with the voters' preferences. And that is how we would suggest the state respond to that kind of tension again.
And do you think the answer from parents would be the same if they're talking, given your chart showed that pre-K is much more predominant with a 5-year-old and home care, parent care with somebody who's a brand new baby? Do you think the answer to that question around an educational framework would be stronger for parents of a 5-year-old and less strong for parents of a new baby?
That makes sense. We didn't ask it directly, so I'd be hesitant to speculate as to the minds of survey respondents of something that we didn't ask, but I can certainly see the logic in the question.
Tracy, I'm curious, so you have 55 children. How many teachers do you have? Instructors,
Well,
supervisors.
and plus correct.
10 teachers that are all full-time.
Yeah. Well, I have one part-time.
So that would put your ratios pretty high compared to
Well, we're not,
regulatory requirements,
Well,
correct?
thing is that we don't take into consideration that we're usually open 12 hours a day. So,
7 days a week,
no, 5 days a week.
5 days a week.
But you have to stagger, so you have somebody that comes in at 6, somebody that leaves at 2, somebody else that'll come in at 12 or 11 o'clock, so they can cover lunches. And then, so it's a very different model of.
Part of the difficulty you guys have is the workday for parents is their 8 hours plus transit. And so they need coverage for more than 8 hours, but the same labor laws apply to childcare.
So in my infant room, it's 2 to 8. In my toddler room, I have one teacher right now with 6. And then I have a pre-K room, it's 3s and 4s combined, and she's in there with 13. And I have to give her help because 7 of those kids are 23.
Are most of your families 12 months a year?
Yeah.
And what's your average monthly charge?
Average, probably one. Well, we do it by week, so but yeah, it'll be under 200. Because my after school program's only $80 a week. And most of my kids right now are in after school.
Oh, interesting.
I have 25 kids for after school. So really 30 is what I have right now full time.
Are you limited on the ratios statutorily, or it's your decision?
So if you're going to have quality, you have to have low ratios. You saw in that way, I kind of chuckled when he said, yes, and when they turn 2, they go to childcare. Well, I wonder why. Mom's like, get them out of the house. But I cannot, yesterday I was in the toddler room working with the teacher, and we had to combine a few 3s in there in the afternoon because somebody got sick. And so, it's like, I'll always go in a room and do what I need to do. And we had 8 together, and she was changing a diaper. I was taking one potty. One climbs on the table. He falls off, bumps his head. The other one's over here hitting somebody else with a magnifying glass on it. I mean, it is a circus, and that is a daily, everyday circus. So if you, you probably would have been the one with the magnifying glass.
Talking about.
But you know why I do it. So.
One thing, and I understand, I don't want to hide a challenge in the questions, but a bit of, I I think that in general, this resonates with me tremendously in other data sources. But I do question just the statistical accuracy of the cohort. You were saying it's challenging to survey this cohort, and I think your number was 800 people. Or something like that.
Yeah.
You feel strong. I'm also not a data scientist, so you feel that is a good. I know you're going to follow up with some additional survey, but are there certain aspects of the feedback that you feel like stronger correlate given other data information that you have, and others that maybe like, well, we really need to challenge this? Can you maybe speak to you think?
Yeah, so as a general matter, 975 statewide is actually a pretty good size for getting the statewide over. When we start digging into the crosstabs, that's when we start introducing uncertainty and that range of where that could be off in figures. And the more crosstabs you go down to, the higher. So if we're looking at parents in a certain income range in a certain part of the state, that is maybe directionally accurate, but it is not, we wouldn't stand behind that if this is a full-on representation of what's going on at that level. But statewide, we feel pretty good about that number as having enough power to get us a good.
Actually wrote this question down. It's similar to yours. Where I work, we do a lot of surveys and things with the public. Are there any family types in that 975 that are missing or lower levels than you would prefer?
I think the hardest challenge for us was going to be getting lower income families who had no attachment to the daycare system.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate the time you spent as an organization focusing on this key issue, and then thank you for coming to present to us. We very much appreciate it.
Thanks for your time. Thanks for your questions. And thanks for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Next, we're going to move to Wendy Obtain with Early Matters Texas. We've heard and information from her and her organization, and that she and Early Matters Texas has been a key partner with us to have some analysis and feedback from the ecosystem, and I think represents a pretty broad range of stakeholders from across the state. And she's going to come give us some information and some ideas.
Wow.
Paper.
Thank you. Morning, everybody. And thank you, Charles, for that presentation. I think it, for someone who has made their career in early childhood, I think it's apparent that there are many challenges in this space. I think we touched on a few of them through that presentation and y'all's questions. I think it's so important, and you guys at the task force, like with your charge, that you don't have to solve every single one of these challenges, but that you get to think about things at a governance level and system level and create something that is strong enough that it's actually going to help set up and start to get at solving some of those persistent challenges. So there's so many times I wanted to pipe in and answer different questions that people have, especially around the workforce and the business model of childcare. So we can have some of those conversations offline if you'd like. But I want to introduce myself. I'm Wendy Obtain. I'm the executive director of Early Matters Texas. As many of you know, Early Matters is a statewide organization. We have local coalitions all across the state. We're in 9 regions and growing, everywhere from our largest urban centers in Houston to small communities out in West Texas, up in the Panhandle. And we get to hear about some of these challenges, but often. It was exciting to me to hear as you guys enter your final stages here and see some of the information that Peter presented on some of the coalescing that's happening around messaging and this idea around unification, because we really see that as something that's going to be able to help impact families and providers on the ground. And I appreciate that the last several meetings you guys have really dived in to try to understand deeply some of these persistent problems around quality, around data. I want to focus today, so there's state governance. I really want to focus today about what happens as all of this starts to flow down into communities. So I regularly hear from our regions about family experience. The system is complicated, it's confusing. I hear all the time from providers about how frustrating it is to run a childcare center and then have to manage all of the different regulations and rules that are coming at them from different agencies. There's a childcare center out in Houston that when you first walk in, you see a whole row of framed certifications and agency like certificates that they have to keep current in order to be in operation. And then I was walking through with some business folks, and they were like, "What is that?" And over it said like Texas Rising Star 2026, and it was like a 6-inch binder, and they were like, that was not part of the childcare tour, but they're like, "Tell us about what is that about?" So it is so real to these providers, Tracy and others on this. Like, the navigation and sort of like the hoops that you have to jump through. We hear about that quite a bit. And I think it's important that we have a state structure that's essential, but that's not going to matter unless we also improve how the system is working. And that's really what I want to talk about. So in front of you, you've got this handout. This is from Philanthropy Advocates compiled this, but you can see here different jurisdictions about how we have different local systems in place. It's really small, I'm sorry. But you can basically see, right, pre-K is running through school districts that coordinate with our education service centers. You've got childcare scholarships that are going through local workforce boards. HHSC works through local healthcare systems. And then you layer on Head Start, which also has local partners, right? None of these maps and lines overlap with each other. Different rules, different regulations, and literally different lines. That complexity, right? This is what I kind of want to emphasize. The complexity is it's fragmented at the top, it's fragmented locally, and then that all is getting passed along to families and providers who have to navigate all of that. So there's that. And then we also have to recognize that local needs are genuinely different, right? What we see in a rural community around their access and workforce need, totally different than what we're hearing in Houston and in Dallas. And when you look sort of at the system writ large, you might say, "Oh, well, okay, we kind of have a sense of what needs are here." But then when you dive in and you talk to a local chamber or local child care providers, you start to see actually there's a real need around infant care here, or this particular neighborhood actually doesn't have service here. So I want to leave you all with a recommendation this morning as you consider the charge in front of you. So you'll find this outlined in greater detail in this report in front of you. This white paper was put together and represents over 20 organizations, their work. And I'm not going to go through, I'll save it for you guys to read on your travel home or flight home. But it starts around page 19, which is really where I want to focus on the local piece. And this is really to consider building a stronger state to local partnership where the state is setting the vision and designated local leads to be able to translate that into plans that fit those communities. So design a system that the state and local leads are carrying that complexity and not passing that along for families. Families and providers are experiencing one coherent system. Okay, so what would be true in this system? 3 things. One, those local entities would really be empowered to coordinate across different funding streams, and they would manage the complexity of compliance and not pass that along, like I mentioned. But that they would do this by putting together a community plan that is informed by the local needs. Second, the local leads, this entity, would be the ones connecting and coordinating across these broken 5 systems: Head Start, pre-K, childcare subsidies. They are bringing that all together. And then third, they are the ones, this local entity is the one serving as the external facing entity for both providers and families. Families could go to this entity with their questions, with their concerns, understanding how to navigate, and they actually have a community navigator, if you will. I don't think we use that language in this paper, but someone who's actually equipped to be able to answer them instead of families and providers left running around to try to figure out who at the state level has the answer for them. They would have someone right there in their community. So there are already pieces of this happening in Texas. We see this in Tarrant County, Dallas, Travis counties. You have local organizations that are actually bringing programs and funding and coordinating that so that the families experience a more coherent system. You'll hear from one of those organizations and a parent during public testimony. But other states, as you guys have heard, have really offered strong lessons as well. Virginia, they do, when someone was here, the Virginia person talked about having local entities. Louisiana also talked about having local networks. What I thought was so interesting about the Louisiana model, though, was that they really thought carefully about implementation and timing. And so that they were building capacity. They started small, sort of building capacity as they failed. So I think the lesson here is not that like Texas should just like take on any one other state's model. We need a Texas solution here, obviously, but it's really that state and local governance go hand in hand. So as you're thinking about state governance, also thinking about what does that look like locally. The other thing I'll add is that it's really important that this relationship run in both directions. So the local entities would actually be able to help take what they're learning and share that back with a new state entity or however you guys determine to actually be able to help inform that work as the state is also working in coordination with the local entity. I would say that the future ECE system that you all put in place or that gets, that ends up in place would really be charged with putting into practice like the roles, the implementation, the details to actually make the partnership successful. But it's really for you all to think about those two things coming together and working well. And so, yeah, I would just say, we have strong leaders. You guys know them. You've heard from them. I get to see and interact with them across the state all the time. And I think having a more intentional state to local partnership would just give those local entities, would give a local lead more direction in being able to serve there. Leave it at that. Questions?
Quick question. And I was going back to your appendix C, I think that's right. It gets in a little more detail with this recommendation. This shows a lot of complexity. If you did an overlay, there's confusion. I kind of want to ask a two-part question. One, if you had to pick one of these as a governance system, regardless of the agency or however we consolidate into or what have you, which model or geographic governance model would you think would you select out of these three?
It's hard to say because none of them, similar to what we're seeing at the state level, all of them are so focused on their own programming. None of them are set up to think about birth through 5 in a coordinated way. So none of them, like everyone has right now a little piece of it. None of them have the full.
All right, so, and you kind of touched on this, Bexar County, San Antonio, Tarrant County, Harris, there's some great coordinators in those. Let's remove those 2 or 3 big ones across the state. That leaves everybody else. How would you create a new map, if such thing, that would bring into some things?
I would leave that to you guys.
That's like an Italian roundabout.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I will just say, like, I do think, to me, it's always been interesting when I look at some of these, some of the lines, like, I'm always curious, who created these? How did these get divvied up? Because the one that stands out to me in particular, is like, there's one workforce board that oversees 3 rural counties. And then you have others like Houston that have 13 counties and our largest metropolitan area. And I again, it kind of goes back to like, yes, important for local context. And I just have sort of like the researcher curiosity in me is like, I wonder who determined those and what was the rationale? And that would be, I think, going forward, what is the rationale for thinking through this and making sure that every locality is covered, right? Especially our rural areas. All of that.
There's other agencies that have economic development and tourism, Department of Agriculture, they all have different ones too, so.
And thank you for taking the questions.
Yeah, and I think it's like what we talked about, just the complexity of knowing and understanding your own entity. To find that person, we've asked the question like, who's the person, who are the people that you come together and truly, and there are some that really know and understand all the complexities, but to know all the complexities just beyond your own, because every entity is so complicated in its own right. To fully understand is a challenge.
Probably nobody wants to give up their turf.
True,
I mean,
exactly.
in all fairness.
I mean, I think in this way, there's some, we're saying we actually want more, right? It's like do this plus. And you know, in fairness to some of these entities, they've said, bring it on. Like we would love to be able to expand to do more.
You're not gonna tell us you had to pick one.
I was looking for that easy answer.
You were, yeah, and I was thinking, yes, and blah, blah. What about a separate entity? What's a new entity?
You know, that is something that our group discussed, was the idea of, I don't know if you call it a new entity, but does the state entity actually do an RFP process for local entities to do this? And it could be, applies is a government entity that currently exists. It could be a local organization that does some of this coordination already. So that was one thing that our group really talked about.
Wendy, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, now we're going to move to a national panel via Zoom. We have two state leaders joining us, one from Ohio and one from North Carolina. So Kara and Amy, thank you so much for joining us today. Kara, if you could please begin with the journey that Ohio has taken. And then as we go through it, or we'll try to wait till the end for questions. But we really appreciate you joining us today as we analyze potential improvement options for the state of Texas.
Thank you for having me. Hopefully you can all hear me okay.
Yes.
And do you have my slides in front of you, or would you like me to try to share them?
Could you please share them?
Yes, let me make sure I can do that from here. All right. Are we good to go?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So thank you so much for having me today. My name is Kara Wente. I am the director for the Ohio Department of Children and Youth. We are a new department that Governor DeWine created in our last biennial budget to be solely focused on kids. The governor started very focused on children when he started his administration in 2019, creating the Office of Children's Initiatives at that time, which was a cabinet level position responsible for overseeing the cross-agency work focused on better outcomes for child well-being. Really had a strong focus at that time on early care and education, and separately children's services. After a few years, we worked really closely together. We had a cabinet, kids cabinet, as we called it, wanted to make sure that we were all running in the same direction, but weren't really seeing the tangible results fast enough to satisfy the governor's ambition and need. And led him to ultimately ask, what were some of the barriers? And some of the barriers were not that we didn't have great cross collaboration, not that we weren't prioritizing the work, but it was really difficult to get 5 or 6 agencies on the same page, authorizing the funding, creating contracts, making sure that the work was moving forward in an efficient manner when it wasn't all under one roof. Ultimately, that led our cabinet directors to come together to say, we really need one agency waking up every day and held accountable to children's outcomes. The governor put that in the biennial budget, so he did take the lead and said he wanted the infrastructure put in statute at the cabinet level to make sure that it didn't lose priority across administrations. We have about 2.5 million children in the state of Ohio. We are a 600-person agency. However, 2 of the driving forces of the new department were we are not creating increased administrative costs, so there was no new administrative funding. And it's also important to recognize that this was not about growing government. We specifically did not ask for any new positions. I am proud to tell you that although we were created in statute in July of 2023, we had a very tight timeline to stand up the new department with an outside date of January 1 of 2025. So oftentimes when you hear people talking about how do you stand them up? What's the timeline? You know, we need several years to really implement. We didn't take that philosophy. We had tried different versions of this in the state of Ohio in previous administrations. We tried a center of early care and education underneath an education agency. We tried creating the one position. Ultimately, what we found is territory got in the way, funding got in the way. We didn't have the perfect answer when we put this in the biennial budget, but what we knew is we wanted the end goal of one person, one entity, one agency being responsible for kids with the accompanying accountability. So we moved forward with standing up the new department actually in January of 2024. Authorized legislation in July of 2023. In January of 2024, we actually had the 600 individuals identified, sitting in the same office and working next to each other. What I will also make very, very clear from a lesson learned is that we did not do what people affectionately call a lift and shift. We wanted to make sure that not only were there deadlines, not only were there goals, but we were going to make people work by function. Families' lives don't work by program. And what we were finding is the way we were setting up our government was based on the program as if they weren't going to interact with other areas. So we made our policy team our full-fledged policy team. In Ohio, we focus prenatal to 21 because we do have children's services. This would work the same way if you really just wanted to focus on early care and education and look prenatal to 5, prenatal to 8, prenatal to 13 to go to, outside of the child care funding. However, what we also knew is that we needed our outside goals to ensure that we had a North Star of solidification, not only because we wanted to make sure that it got set up under this administration, but we wanted one round of a budget under Governor DeWine to make sure that we could work out the kinks. We could put in necessary changes if we needed additional statutory changes and to do any cleanup. So really felt strongly that one entity with authority, with accountability, with a direct timeline, but not growing government. What I should also add is that we actually reduced 40 positions through this transition with no new admin cost. So that kind of gives you our overview structure. One of the things that I wanted to also call out is part of the reason this is, we believe, is working in the state of Ohio is because it put the data under one roof. It allows us now to see where are we making the differences? Where are our families interacting across our system? A really good example, one of the very first changes we made when the department came together, where we had a call center that focused prenatal to age 3, focused on home visiting and early intervention. When we became one entity, we said, really, we need to fill the gap from birth to 5. When kids enter school districts, they have different resources, they have different access. But in that birth to 5 range, there can be a gap if families don't know when they should be interacting with their district. So we immediately opened up our call center and we leveraged what we call an ages and stages questionnaire. And the reason that's important is because it gave us a tangible product to give to a family when they had questions around the development of their child. It's a very scary time. And we said, if it's good for prenatal to 3, let's open it prenatal to 5. We knew a ton of our pediatricians were already using it. So we actually purchased the Sparkler app. And the details of what this app does are not the important part. What I want to hear, I hope you take away from it, is the fact that putting this information under one entity, making sure that we were looking across the system at how a family interacts with our system, allowed us to say, let's fill that gap. In our first year, we went from just over 1,000 screenings to more than 20,000. Those screenings weren't a per cost. It was the family going on, answering questions. Can little Johnny hold a pencil? Can Johnny speak in complete sentences? Is Johnny making eye contact? What it allowed us to do is to take that information and to decide when a referral should be made. What it created was an efficiency that we didn't even know we needed. But our referrals for early intervention actually remained the same or went down slightly. But our use of early intervention, the number of children that were actually referred and receiving services went up. That meant our local resources weren't used on screening and evaluation. They were used on tangibly assessing and providing services to those families. That's what the department was created to do, to meet a family where they are and to better utilize the services and supports we need to make sure they get to the families when they need them. That was exactly what this change did. That's what we were focused on as we were creating the new department. What I will also tell you is that we were steadfast in ensuring that we all knew our goals. So often in health and human services, we say, well, we won't see that change until kids graduate, or we won't see that kid until this cohort reaches 8th grade. And we knew we didn't have that luxury. We had to prove that putting these programs together under one roof was going to better utilize the resources we were given to have better outcomes for kids. And the only way you can do that, in my mind, is to, one, measure it and be open and honest about what's working. So we picked 3 goals. As I said, we're prenatal to 21. I know that's maybe a little different than what you're looking at, but our 3 goals are: we want more babies to reach their first birthday. Ohio is really, really not doing well in infant mortality. And we had seen our numbers holding at 7.1 per thousand for years. So we knew we needed to drive change in this space. We also wanted to make sure that we had more kids entering kindergarten socially, emotionally, and educationally ready to learn. And we had been hovering around 35 to 36% of our kids demonstrating on our kindergarten readiness assessment. We do have an assessment that all of the children that go into our public and charter non-pubs leverage. So we had a pretty good baseline of knowing where we were starting from. And our 3rd goal was in our children's service space, and we wanted fewer children to enter children's services. And really that goes to meeting that family when they have a question, not a crisis, meeting them where they're at with our prevention and stabilization services. What you will see is, since we were created as a department, since we took the very, very intentional work of leaning into 3 goals, measuring and being transparent about evidence-based practice, making sure things are meeting fidelity, and then pivoting when it's not working, we've seen great progress. Last year, we hit our 20-year low for infant mortality. We had a 6.4 per thousand. It's the first movement we've seen of that kind. What that means tangibly to us here in Ohio is our birth rate has remained relatively stagnant, but we have 90 more babies that reach their first birthday. That's about 4 kindergarten classrooms. That's a win. When we talk about kindergarten readiness, last year is the first time we saw growth from that 35 to 36% demonstrating to 44.8%. That's more than 7,000 more kids demonstrating. That isn't one program. That is us leveraging our resources, early identification for early intervention, preschool special education, requiring a curriculum aligned with the early learning development standards and the science of reading in our licensed childcare programs if they're getting public funds. We also provide the training. Those changes clearly mattered. And then in children's services, you actually see the number go up. We've talked about it. We've had more referrals. We've also changed our methodology on how we do the math because the federal government now includes kids entering less than 7 days. But we kind of expected that number to go up because as you talk about it, you do get referrals, and those are referrals we should have. So although we don't like to see that number going up, it does make us question what interventions and preventions we're doing. We know we need to monitor, and we need to continue to look at where we can invest earlier. I don't expect you to be able to read this. I know it's really small, but this is just another way that we've been intentional about driving our work, not only to our external partners, but to our internal culture here at the department. We want every member of this team to recognize that they are a part of one of our 3 goals. And we didn't think it was enough to just say it. We wanted to show them on a logic model. Here is our work. Here are our short-term goals. You should see yourself in it. How are we supporting families? How are we lifting our communities? And this is on our website. It's something we talk about frequently. We have really leaned into how do you build a culture to get people to work together? Because that was the goal of the department. It wasn't that we just wanted this new fancy agency. It was that we wanted to ensure that people worked differently. And the only way to get there was to focus on function. And we're looking at our outcomes. We focus a lot on early care and education to make sure that we're supporting today's workforce and preparing our next workforce. Those are our goals and what are driving our day-to-day work, but it's also the outcomes we're measuring. Last but not least, you heard about our goals. One of the other pieces we kept in the forefront as a new department was family voice, and not just family, mom, dad, kids. We also leaned into our former foster youth and our current foster youth, because our system, whether we like it or not, we know when we fail, because that's when kids end up in children's services. It's when families destabilize. So whether you pull in children's services or not, they are a very valuable group to talk to about what could you do different to reach them earlier, to keep them together, to make sure that you're supporting them in a way that really fits the need of their family. We do 12 sessions every 6 months where the department team members go out into the community. One of the first things we learned is our families wanted someone to talk to. We actually hired 24 staff that are not state staff, they're community staff. We fund our community partners to hire staff from the community to, one, know and understand our system. Because oftentimes our families feel better about navigating the system with someone that isn't a government employee, especially in our case, one connected to children's services. So we really tried to meet them where they were. And that has been an invaluable resource to actually drive investments and to figure out, why is someone not using home visiting? Is it who's presenting it to them? Is it because they don't want someone in their home? You know, we invest in these programs and we think we're doing a good job when we're checking the box and I'm serving 12,000 more kids. But is it the 12,000 kids that need it? And that's really what's driving our work and connection process right now at the Department of Children and Youth here in Ohio. So that kind of gives you a very quick rundown. I know you are a very busy committee, so I wanted to be as brief as possible, but wanted to just articulate kind of how we got here. We tried different ways. It wasn't getting us the results. We put it in statute. We gave it cabinet level definition. We gave it a lot of transparency and accountability. We set our goals. We listened to our community, and now we're holding ourselves accountable to our outcomes. I would be happy to answer any questions if you have time, but also understand that you are on a tight timeline today.
Kara, could you give us more detail on the specific functions within early child care and education that were part of the consolidation of the new office?
Absolutely. I'd be happy to. So we have everything here from infant mortality and maternal health to early intervention, preschool special education. We do the licensing function, regulatory compliance of all child care programs and preschool programs and school age programs. That actually came from our Department of Education and Workforce and the former Job and Family Service entity, all under one roof. That's where we really created a lot of efficiencies in our regulatory compliance. We cross-trained staff. We cut a contract of $300,000, and we are meeting all of our health and safety compliance requirements now. So that regulatory compliance, we also do the eligibility side. So we have publicly funded childcare eligibility that runs through our office as the supervisory entity, the regulatory compliance, and then Dolly Parton Imagination Library from a curriculum and setting standards is also here at the department in the scheme of early care and education.
What about food and nutrition?
Food and nutrition is still separate. One conversation that we continue to have is around WIC, but the SNAP program is housed at another department.
Do you have a waiting list for subsidized children?
We do not maintain a waiting list in the state of Ohio. We do know that we do a lot of assessment around access and affordability. We actually have increased our capacity to serve kids by several thousand over the last few years. I think we're at 500. We have the capacity to serve on any given time about 580,000 kids. So we know that there are programs. Oftentimes what we hear is it's not the parents' first choice. So that's where we're really focusing on how do we get more programs to be the quality that their families would want so that they have access to the programs that they need and want. But we do not maintain a wait list at the state level.
Does your state give money for that wait list, or how are you funding not having a wait list?
So in the state of Ohio, our publicly funded childcare program serves about 100,000 children. We have a childcare, so that goes up to 145% of the federal poverty level. Families that are at or below 145%, they're on subsidy. We have to fund them. From 146 to 200%, we have what we call the Child Care Choice Voucher Program. So if a family is working or going to school, we will grant them a voucher that covers about 80% of their child care, and they can use that at any of our licensed programs. If they're not working, the opportunity that would be available to them is our public preschool program for 3 and 4-year-olds. Statewide, our childcare program is just under $1 billion. And then that doesn't include our public preschool, which is about 130 million as well.
Kara, two things in your report that really stood out to me: built with a deadline and bold goals. Backing up a little bit, looking at what got you to where you are, did y'all have a task force similar to what we're working with right now ahead of time? And then the legislature carved that out. How did y'all come up with that?
So we had our cabinet directors come to consensus to say we think there needs to be a kids department. So we did not have a formal task force, but we did have internal agreement. Then we actually proposed it in the executive budget we do a 2-year budget. So the new department was carved out and put into statute at the very early onset of our biennial budget and was maintained through the General Assembly. So we did not have a task force. And I will tell you that we did not have every answer when it was put into statute. We knew the primary pillars that we wanted. In the case of Ohio, we knew maternal infant vitality. We knew early intervention. We knew everything from the child care side. So regulatory, eligibility, and children's services were coming. And we gave ourselves the latitude in that statute to make some of those ongoing decisions. What also I think helped us is other departments did not have the specific administrative funding that was going to be pulled from them at the time the bill was introduced. And that may sound crazy, but what often gets in the way of some of these decisions are the territories and the funding that are used to support cross-program responsibilities. And that is a very real concern and need, but it was one that we knew we could work through, and one that we allowed ourselves the flexibility to work through that 18-month process. And there were a lot of negotiations that had to happen behind the scenes, but it required us, because we had the out goal and we had the date, to figure it out. So that deadline, I will also tell you, the day the governor announced that he was appointing me to this role, he leaned over and said, you know that is an outside date. That 18-month date is an outside date. And I said, yes, sir, I understand that. And we went and did our news press conference. And I said, how much of an outside date is it? And we were very fortunate that one of the silver linings of COVID, we knew we could identify the team quickly, and we had office space that was available to us. One of the best things we did is identify the team and put them in a space where they had to get to know each other. I will just take 1 second to give you an example. I had an early care and education worker who was our technical assistance guru. So smart. I trusted this man on any conversation that I had around a question for early care and education. He was sitting next to someone on our home visiting side. And he's like, I should be talking about home visiting to our early care and education professionals. They probably know the kids that would benefit and the families that would benefit from home visiting. And I have never once brought that conversation in to a teacher. Well, imagine the power of one of our teachers where I'm bringing my kid because I'm working and I trust you. You telling me, hey, did you know about this support? Yeah, it's through government, but it's a really nice person. She's at the local level. I happen to know her. That had a lot more power than anything else that we could have prescribed or a new program we could have stood up.
Kara, thank you so much. We very much appreciate it. This was a very helpful conversation. We may have some follow-up. We have to cut it short here, but we have some follow-up questions that we'll send to you if possible.
Happy to help however we can. Thanks for your time today.
Great, thank you. Next, we're moving to Amy Covage from North Carolina Partnership for Children. Amy, if you could please walk us through the program you oversee, and that I think will be of assistance to our analysis. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor and pleasure to be with you all. I will go ahead and share my screen if that is okay. And makes sense. Let's see. How is that?
Good.
Okay, terrific. I am just on my laptop, so I have pulled up a second laptop, but don't have a monitor with me. I'm traveling, but again, it is an honor to be with you. I'm Amy Covage, and I am president of the North Carolina Partnership for Children, joining in August of 2020, so just 6 years ago, in the midst of COVID, et cetera, and came from work at the national level and had done a little bit of work in Texas and have deep respect for the work you all had done. I was at UVA with their National Center for Research on Early Childhood Education. That morphed into a nonprofit and then into a for-profit before I came to Smart Start in North Carolina. But I'll go ahead and give you an overview of Smart Start, and then we'll have time for questions. But also, please ask questions as I go if you would like. So Smart Start started in 1993, a bipartisan effort. Governor Hunt at the time was a Democrat. The legislature was bipartisan, and it has moved and morphed for over 30 years now. We celebrated our 30th anniversary recently. When we celebrated our 25th, I will mention Dolly Parton came and did an incredible rendition of Jolene on the spur of the moment. And I just want to express our heartfelt sadness and gratitude for her legacy as she passed away yesterday. We were one of the original Dolly Parton Imagination Library sites, and we continue to this day, and it's a very strong part of our Smart Start work. So Smart Start is a state to local public-private system of early care and education, broadly writ. So when we say early care and education, we're including the comprehensive needs of young children and their families and all who care for and educate them. So that's inclusive of child and family health, family support, early literacy, and importantly, early care and education. And I recognize that Governor Abbott has named this the Early Childhood Education Task Force. Likewise, in North Carolina, we have an Early Childhood Education Task Force, but we are looking at those comprehensive services, and I'll allude to those as we go forward. Here is a map of our state of North Carolina and of the Smart Start network. When it was created back in 1993, the state was given 5 years to hit every county and bring them on board with a local partnership serving their county. We have 100 counties in North Carolina, and it didn't make sense for every county to have one. So as you can see here at the bottom of the slide, 14 regional local partnerships. So those are some of our smallest counties, that grouped together in a local partnership way. We still have some morphing into that, even over 30 years later, have conversations with local partnerships that may have a leadership change, may have a large investment coming in a regional way. And they say, maybe we should consider banding together, merging, I should say, our local partnerships in some of our local counties. But few and far between. I would say that's probably slowed considerably since maybe 2018, 2019. None have merged under in my tenure during my time. Not that we're opposed to it by any means. Let's see, I also want to say here that as you look at this, baked into our every county is served by a local partnership, and they are an independent 501c3, that there is language in our legislation that models the North Carolina Partnership for Children, my organization that I run. We're a nonprofit, but we're one of about 10 organizations like Railroad Commission and some others who are a component part of the North Carolina state budget. So we do get a lot of funding, and we have annual audits with the state auditor. But importantly, each of these local partnerships is their own independent 501c3 and a public-private partnership. We have a match at the state level of 19% at NCPC, and we have that, and the local partnerships are accountable for that requirement in each of their counties as well. I'm happy to say we always exceed it. So our non-state match of dollars is always exceeding that 19%, more in the 25% range, even up to 30%. And importantly, we are bipartisan at NCPC, a very carefully designed approach with the governor appointing X number from our 26 members and the board chair, and then also the House and Senate, both majority and minority parties as well. 4 ex officio members of our board is our Department of Public Instruction or Education Department superintendent, community colleges president, head or director of the North Carolina Pre-K program, NC Pre-K, and then the secretary of DHHS. Or their designees. Our mission is to advance a high quality, comprehensive, as I mentioned, in looking at all the needs of a child and their family, accountable. We're very proud of our very clean record in our state audits, in our work toward accountability, both for ourselves as NCPC, but also for those 75 local partnerships, and that benefits each child in North Carolina, beginning with a healthy birth. Critically important. We do focus in on maternal and infant health and mortality. Our vision is that each North Carolinian resident reaches their potential and is prepared for school life and success, and I would add, when they get to that kindergarten door. We are responsible from that hospital, and in our last annual report that I can forward to you, you can see a nice graphic showing a baby coming in and into the world in North Carolina, is welcomed into the Smart Start system by their community, and then it moves into kindergarten at age 5 or wherever they may go at age 5. And the niche is that we lead the network of local partnerships and are accountable to the governor's office, to the General Assembly, to our private funders as well. Here are those, got one more, there we go, content areas that I mentioned in the comprehensive needs and services. These content areas are covered by evidence-based and evidence-informed programs. We have a Smart Solutions catalog that NCPC maintains. I can share a link with you all. And our learning and evaluation team, a team of 4 folks, small and mighty, evaluates the solutions. We meet with vendors, they meet with higher education folks, have cutting edge programs and some of the most long lasting, enduring programs like the ASQ that Kara mentioned they're using in Ohio. A lot of our local partnerships use that screening tool, ages and stages, but and everything in between. And we try to be very responsive. Our legislation says that we will ensure programs and the dollars are going toward impact and that local partnerships have maximum flexibility. So you can imagine that is a constant tension and it is a balance. And we try to work very hard with our local partnerships as well as our state agency partners to ensure we're hitting the right balance and being true to that legislative intent. Early learning outcomes, we look at educator compensation. We are the original funder of the wages program, which is a semi-annual, twice a year, roughly $1,200 to $1,400 stipend or bonus to a teacher who is showing that they are continuing their education in early childhood education. And then sometimes there is an end of year stipend if for retention as well. And that is only available after you've been in a program for 6 months. Those are all funded by Smart Start local partnership dollars, those stipends. We focus on educator qualifications through that program and through scholarship programs for teachers. Program quality, we are proud that we've raised the quality dramatically since North Carolina was one of the first states to develop a quality improvement system back in the early 2000s and is undergoing a modernization effort of QRIS or QIS. And we are the state's match to draw down the Child Care Development Fund dollars that go towards subsidy and TANF. We direct some of our TANF funds in North Carolina to child care subsidy, and our state dollars for Smart Start are used to match that, roughly $59 million of our roughly $165 million annual state public dollars that we receive at NCPC. Parenting outcomes, we focus in on parenting education. We focus in on home visiting. And then in child and family health outcomes, we support prenatal and newborn services, doula and family navigation, and nutrition, healthcare access, and support. I'm really glad that you brought up the nutrition. I think that is so important. And a lot of our local partnerships work with farm to ECE programs. You may have those in Texas as well. We work on using community kitchens for childcare programs. Church kitchens are used to be able to provide a local support for nutrition programs and early care and education. Yesterday, I met with the commissioner of the Department of Public Safety in North Carolina about a gun locking system and could they be giving out free gun locks to ensure young children in North Carolina are safe and have increased safety from gun violence and accidents. And they could come to our local partnership health fairs and literacy fairs, etc. They could have a box of them free in the waiting room in a local partnership. Nearly all of our local partnerships have a storefront, if you will, a local partnership that you can say, oh, you need help as a new parent. You've just moved into the community. There you go. There's the local partnership, the Smart Start in your community. And then early literacy outcomes. I mentioned DPIL, that's Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. We have that available to all children in North Carolina, birth to 5, at about 50 to 50% saturation, I would say. We're in the midst of getting some more increased recurring funds. We were at 7 million for a while, went up to 8.5 million recurring dollars from the General Assembly annually, and now are going up to 9.5 and till 2032 have even an additional 5 million to spend. So we're excited about investing there in that program. That's a book a month for young children. It comes to their home, and then there's Raising a Reader and Book Babies as well. This slide shows the flow of funds that is important to understand. I mentioned that we're a component part of the state budget, that the General Assembly passes that state budget, and we just had it passed. I'm very excited about that in July because we were operating for a while without a state budget. It was just a carry forward budget that we were under. Then it goes to our Department of Health and Human Services division. This DCD acronym or abbreviation is the Division of Child Development and Early Education. And they oversee and negotiate with us outcomes aligned with the legislation, ensuring we stick with the legislative mandate of no more than 10% that goes to administrative costs. Importantly, we had operated until 2022 under an 8%, and we slowly went to 9%, and now we're at 10% and stopping there, but that was a strong advocacy effort. And I will mention at the state level, we keep our admin at about 5%. We try to keep it very minimal. And a chunk of that is going toward local partnership technical assistance. I have an HR director that is phenomenal, a team of one. She's providing a lot of professional services in the HR realm to our local partnerships. Some of them are very small in staff. They might only have 3 people, for example. And then it comes to NCPC, my organization, and the funds flow through us through a very careful needs assessment and needs formula that we do and calculate. And then we allocate, based on that needs formula, these public dollars to all 100 counties. And again, there are actually 75 local partnerships because those 14 regional local partnerships that I mentioned. We have these spending mandates. I mentioned the 10% admin, but I'll also mention that we are required to spend 70% of our state funds, public dollars, on early care and education. And that has been formally defined. So it is licensed programs or licensed exempt. So we have GS10s, those are our faith-based partners in communities providing childcare. And we'll have part day or part year programs, such as a summer camp program. Those are license exempt, but we put them in our early care and education bucket in that receiving 70% of the funds. Then we have about 30% remaining, or exactly 30%, but we do have all the private dollars and some federal flowing dollars that can be counted in there. That can go to child health, nutrition, family support, which is that home visiting, parenting ed, and early literacies in that bucket. Another note is that of the 70% childcare related, this early care and education childcare related amount, 30% of that is mandated to be the match to draw down those federal dollars in CCDF, Child Care Development Fund subsidy, and TANF. Our pillars of success that I would call out to you all as you are considering state governance models and what you might want to move forward with is the transparency. It's so critically important to be transparent, to be honest and authentic and live into our legislative mandates. And we do that. I think that probably the Finance and Research Division over at NCGA is tired of hearing, oh, Amy has one more clarifying question. But we want to be sure we're aligned with legislative intent. That we are accountable again. So aligned with that as well. Our local partnerships would say, oh, NCPC, you're too much. Get out of our business. But we do hold them accountable. We want to ensure those dollars are going toward impact and support them. Really, I think of us as a foundation or undergirding instead of being that umbrella. But at times, as you all can imagine, you have to be that heavy and say, hold on, are you really still funding this program? If you don't have outcomes at this point in time, we're going to work with you to transition. What other program could you invest in if this is not meeting your community's needs? And then efficient. Again, I mentioned the low admin we keep, ensuring that we are blending and braiding. Kara mentioned that. It gets challenging. We have requirements from this funding stream and requirements for this program or setting type, but we try very hard to be efficient, blend and braid. Their Head Start programs working, of course, in every state in the country. And I know in Texas and certainly in North Carolina, they're a federal to local model. And we encourage and support our local partnerships to meet with their Head Start grantee. Think about who's offering a training in this model of curriculum. Let's partner in on this. We don't have to have this just paid out of one program if multiple providers are using such a program or curriculum. So I will pause there. I hope I've answered or covered a lot of the information that you were hoping to have, but please let me know what else I could answer or cover for you.
I had one question. You mentioned you would allocate, and your graphics were really, I like the simplicity of them. But how the funding formula, how you allocate it back to the counties or to the regions. Is that something you could share with us or?
Yes. Yeah, I have a good slide or few slides where I could share that with you, and we'll be sure to do that.
Thanks.
That needs formula. And our requirement is, I believe it's biannually, the board must review that in the allocation methodology.
Amy, can I ask a quick question? I might have missed it on your earlier slide, so I apologize if I missed it. But
Sure.
Can you share with us the population number or volume that you serve, and then the ages that your program serves?
Yes, it is a hard question to answer. We have roughly 700,000 Smart Start kiddos in North Carolina, and that's our birth to 5 population. So we work within that number. And if you think about it, the Dolly Parton Imagination Library is universal. And so we could be funding all of those kids touched with a Smart Start dollars, because most of our local partnerships fund some of with that allocation they receive of public dollars, add in to the state's allocation for Dolly Parton. So those kids are getting touched, if you will, by Smart Start. Smart Start's not running its own programs, importantly, but it is partnering with folks, well, I should say, not running its own childcare centers, but partnering with those centers. And so they are involved in nearly all the quality improvement activities happening in a community. So any child that is in a formal childcare setting or one of the license exempt would be getting some support, if you will, from Smart Start. If they're on subsidy, some of those dollars are supported from that local partnership subsidy. So it's really hard to put a number on that, but I'll share with you our annual report that I believe breaks it down, and I don't have off the top of my head the amount going or number of children reached in those priority areas of family support, early care and education, and child and family health. I also will note that every publicly funded program that you can imagine in early childhood, I think I can say this definitively, is enhanced by the Smart Start dollars. So that goes for the Head Start programs, but importantly, it goes for NC Pre-K. We reach about 30,000, I think it is, of our population of 4-year-olds. NC Pre-K is an income eligibility. It is our pre-K program just for 4-year-olds, income eligible children, as well as some categorical eligibility for military families and children with disabilities. But we're not anywhere near meeting all 75%, nor are we at rates that providers are knocking on the door saying, hey, I want to be an NC Pre-K provider. But where they are is where the Smart Start local partnership is enhancing that rate to say, hey, providers, look at how much we will pay for a slot if you open an NC Pre-K classroom and serve children with the NC Pre-K program. So that is another way in which they are undergirding and enhancing. And every local partnership's board chair, they get this wonderful volunteer honor to be the chair of their local partnership. And then they're told, oh, by the way, you're also the co-chair with the superintendent in your county of the NC Pre-K committee, responsible for deciding where those dollars go in the state's NC Pre-K allocation to the 100 counties. So that's another big task and role that we play. And then they are also required to then be agnostic and ensure that funding goes to community-based childcare providers, elementary or preschool programs in public schools, the mostly elementary school programs. And we don't yet have it in family childcare, but that is a consideration currently and a recommendation currently to analyze that. And then I'd also say, sorry, keep going forever, on family, friend, and neighbor care, that we are also supporting that. Most of our local partnerships, or many of our local partnerships, provide playgroups and parenting education and resource libraries. So a family can come again to that Main Street shop storefront and say, hey, I need materials for X, or I need information on this about my child's development. I have concerns about my child's development. Or I'd like to be part of your Kaleidoscope Play and Learn playgroup. And that's a wonderful program that we fund as well in many communities. It's really the infrastructure of early childhood in North Carolina. And when tragedy hits, example of Western North Carolina and Hurricane Helene, local partnerships in the West were immediately activated, called in by emergency management folks to say, okay, how can we help young children and families? How are the young children and families? Where are they? What do they need? Their supporters, their childcare providers, how are they doing? And it's almost, well, I'd like to think that it's turnkey, but they activate and go into action. And then again, importantly, that public-private partnership ensures that businesses, employers, LEA, the school districts, healthcare providers, childcare providers, parents, all are serving on the board of the local partnership and immediately can go into action too. And we saw that with the Boone Chamber of Commerce covering parent fees during Hurricane Helene aftermath. We saw that with the Biltmore Corporation, the Biltmore Estate in Asheville, North Carolina, activating and saying, we realize there is a critical need for infant toddler care in our county. The county is Buncombe County, and we need to activate. What can we do? Local partnership. They set up a wonderful program where they are increasing the rate for infant toddler slots and providing resources to providers to increase infant and toddler care in Buncombe County.
Ms. Cubbage, thank you
Yes.
so much for your time today. We very much appreciate the information and answering our questions, and your insights will help us greatly. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciated being with you all.
Okay, have a good. We're going to take a 10-minute break. When we come back, we're going to have a task force discussion on what we heard today, key thoughts, things you learned about, questions you may have as follow-up. And then after that, we'll have public testimony. Yeah, I just would like to open up the floor for anybody that would like to start just the conversation around key insights from what we heard this morning or leading up to this morning from other conversations, questions you may have, concerns, how it landed for y'all, what was interesting. So please, there's no formal way to do this. Step in.
Just a positive share out that I thought was very hopeful to hear is that this unified governance can also help make sure. I mean, yes, there's budgetary efficiencies, but I loved hearing about the ECI program being more efficient in who is getting serviced, who is getting seen, who's getting assessed. Because I know ECI is doing so much work, but on the other side, I see so many of the kids that are getting missed because they don't realize or they don't know, and you know, because there's so many different, where do I go? So I just love that we can be better serving kids if it's more unified.
Yes, you don't have to raise your hand either.
Well, I'll just keep talking and I don't leave that good. I think my big takeaway, and I just, you know, always think about this, it's always great to hear from other states. It's so helpful, I think, to learn from them and think about how we might customize it here. I ran some quick data. I know I was asking population questions and service. So just as an orientation here, so for Ohio, Texas has 3 times as many people in the age group 0. I just did 0 to 18. And then for North Carolina, we have 3.5 times more than the 0 to 5. So something for
I
us
was
to
curious though, Ohio, they showed a figure that said 2.5 million kids. I wonder if they're going up to 6-year-olds.
I heard it was up to 21.
Oh, 2.5 million kids is 0 to 20.
Yeah, because sometimes
We got that cohort 0 to 5.
which
Okay, I was curious. I was like, I didn't see the. Okay, thank you.
yeah, so again, so for Ohio, it was 0 to 21, and then I asked my question, North Carolina, it was 0 to 5. So different populations, but I did a quick comparison of the populations we have in those groups. So something for us to think about as we're diving in is how do we compare the complexity that come with that?
Yeah, good call out. Yeah.
I would just say that, you know, whether we're hearing from people who study Texas or people from other states, it reinforces the idea that the way that we're fragmented today in our goals and our missions and the silos in our data is needs to be consolidated in some way. And I think everything just seems to point when you look inside or out.
One follow-up I think Shannon's gonna have. Ohio is they alluded to public pre-K. But she didn't explicitly say that was part of the consolidated. So we will get that follow-up. And if it's not part of the base, then that they obviously have established some pretty intense level of collaboration coordination because the whole goal is the readiness for them. So if that's not technically under this office's jurisdiction, they would need, I would assume, pretty intense collaboration. Make that work. So quality standards, being similar assessment tools, funding, all that stuff, tracking. So I wish we got that. Follow that. I think that is key for our conversation.
Peter, one thing stood out to me. It's in the last presentation. They actually defined, you know, hey, 10% is going to be for overhead, whatever it is. Right. And I think that's good metrics to be a good starting point. Right? 10%, then the rest of it is divided 70-30. I liked some of the focus on that really defined. Then you get in, start to now what all funding from our side, what all funding is going to come back in. Going back to the Ohio, I did like the bold deadline, but I keep coming back, you know, as soon as I start getting excited about it, all right, there's a deadline. Our legislature meets every 2 years, unlike everybody else's. That's good in that. But in saying that, how do we formulate in our recommendation? Maybe we should be bold.
Sure.
And do this. But I keep coming back to something that was brought up by a couple of the agencies in our last meeting. You know, there's relationships they have, there's predefined metrics that they have, and what we don't want to have happen is the kids and the families suffer. So how do we do that? Is there a graduated implementation period, assuming, you know, bills pass, you know, to try to do it within 2 years, for example,
sure,
or something. But I thought there was some good, be bold, and I think that was good advice.
Yeah. On your first comment, I did think the same thing first, and then as it was ruminating in my mind, I thought, you know, I wonder how that is actually executed with the funding streams, because certain of their funding streams have its own administrative thresholds, and so you know, I could argue. I get your. I agree with your initial point. It's very simple, straightforward. Hey, there's mandates, but how does that weave into everything else? So it's like the definition of the federal CCDF funds and administrative thresholds or what they have to spend on quality. How does that count towards administration or not? So I could see it with the goal of being simplifying could actually make it more complicated, you know? And I think it does lead to back to what Jay was saying, consolidation should help with that, right? So you could at least say, hey, here is the tracking of each fund, here is the mandates, and here is the flexible spending. And we should have some goals, some constraints on those.
One thing that hit me also, then it went down, in the last one, North Carolina, then it funneled down to the region, the counties. So I was thinking ahead, what is our recommendation going to look like? Well, it's very simplified. I think Wendy showed the deal. What we have right now with the 3 different levels is not going to work. This the map right here.
Sure.
And I mean, thank you for trying to take one of these. Do we pick one of those to go by, or is there a better model? And I hate to recreate something or suggest something that's brand new, but is there another region of something that's out there? And I was playing in between, just looking at something, all the different agencies that exist, from Governor's Economic Development Tourism to TxDOT to DPS, Parks and Wildlife, Rural Ag, all the different agencies that we have. There's different models, and one that kind of popped out where I think it had some good independent governance is a Council of Governments. And and then maybe you have some input coming back in as we begin to formulate how that's going to look like with representatives. I heard one little comment. There were representatives on the local boards from all of the key agencies or key cabinets. So how do you have somebody there from Workforce Commission, Health and Human Services, TEA that's in there to help govern that, or their designee, regional designee somehow? But I thought there were some elements getting the craft to come forward.
One takeaway I definitely had in the second one, and even a little bit in Ohio, is I think we do have to be cautious around scope creep. I think I heard gun boxes and lunch boxes and all kinds of boxes that they're giving out and helping out, and all good causes, right? You can go down the list and say, well, of course we don't want accidental gun. But I think it's a reminder for me that we do have to prioritize. We've been tasked with that, and that's important to the stakeholders that are waiting for applications. And you got to be cautious around some of the scope creep that's probably already happened in the state of Texas in this ecosystem and outside of it, and as much as we can prioritize our report and recommendations, even at the potential detriment of some criticism of how come your report's not 47,000 pages long?
Expand on that.
Anything? That's fine. We're
scope creep.
Yeah.
And you think about, if you look at this map, sorry to answer, we'll use your map. Jay and I called, we didn't get here overnight.
Sure.
So somebody had an idea and said, stick part of it over here, stick part of it over there. So how do we stop this with the recommendation, because we can't control legislature?
Yeah.
From going back, or next thing, but we don't want this to become a Christmas tree, to your point, where they keep, let's add this in there, let's add this in there. And I thought a couple of the states had more stuff in there than what the initial scope is, especially with what we're working on.
Well, I agree. Again, I think a key component of our product that should come out is representing the problem well, or maybe not just the problem, the current situation well. And through visualization, through summarized, precise information that shows where we are now. And I think that within obviously some potential recommendations for improvements, and I think quite frankly some of the logical explanation of the current situation that is complex when you talk about it a lot, but when you can write it on paper, it can be viewed relatively easy with some information that there needs to be there's opportunity for improvements and opportunity for more efficiency.
Peter, I think one recommendation that I think would be helpful. You're here in Austin, and you look out at the state and you make your best judgment on how that would fit in with what we already have, right? But it's actually the people, the boots on the ground, that are down in the trenches in these areas of Texas. They're working with the agencies and working with the parents and working with the children that actually can see, I'm not saying people's recommendations, everybody's has to have input, but they can see the realistic picture of what's going on with childcare right now. Because they're the ones that actually get their hands in it, and to Tracy's point, change the diapers, whatever it is. But I would recommend strongly that if a recommendation of whatever we recommend, that we include the people that are not in Austin, that are actually out in the field, that are actually working with the children, the teachers, and the parents.
Great.
Fine, I'll take the task and I'll just make me the entity. No, but I do like the title Texas Partnership for Children. Like that. Sounds good. Partnership, because we're all coming together. But I agree with Nancy. We definitely need to bring us into the conversation.
We kind of pattern in economic development in like the workforce has. We find out in our region, we're kind of like patterned like with the COGS, because they have an economic development division in economic development. Yeah, all of this, everybody is in economic development. But you drill down to the county judges and the people that are actually working, trying to find a solution. And I think their input would be not just very valuable, but is critical to forming something new and that's workable for everybody. Stay down to the person.
Great. Okay, anything else? Great, we'll move on to public testimony. Monica, are you gonna call public testimony? Okay.
Okay, we'll start with Kim Cochran.
Thank you so much. Good morning. Good morning. Thanks for having me, and again, because I've seen you guys all before. Good conversation this morning. The balance of making it not so huge, but yet being pinpointed at low capacity. So, my name is Kim Cochran. I'm with Children at Risk, as you have known, and as you consider our re-envisioning what this governance model could potentially look like, I'm here to really talk about that local approach. And I know Wendy hit on it again earlier this morning as well. And as you know, Texas's communities are vast and different. The communities that look very different if you're in Houston, El Paso, up the valley. And local leaders understand the providers, the families, the workforce, and the economic conditions that in each of our communities. But local flexibility needs to exist within clear statewide frameworks. The state needs to be clear about what is expected, what outcomes must be achieved, and what is within local control. Right now, sometimes that is clear and sometimes that's not. And I'm going to give an example specifically around the quality dollars that are part of Child Care Development Block Grant. So the federal Child Care Development Block Grant requires states to spend 70% on direct scholarships and care, and we do. We spend we have to spend at least 9% on quality initiatives to help providers, at least 3% on infant toddler supports, and no more than 5% on our admin costs. The Texas Workforce Commission determines the overall allocations, and then local workforce boards get to determine the discretion of how they're spending those quality dollars. Over the last 2 years, we at Children at Risk have analyzed how those local workforce boards are using those quality dollars and are paving the way to quality report. The QR code on your handout will take you to that full report, and you can actually go back and look at last year's report as well. But But I wanted to highlight some things that we had noticed over the report. In 2023, 81% of our quality investments went to Texas Rising Star supports, and that makes sense because we were ramping up for mandatory PRS. By 2024, that had backed down to 42% across the state. At the same time, investments for professional development went up, and infant and toddler investments also increased. And in 2024, we also saw a jump in the other bucket, which was really around wage supplements that workforce boards were doing for providers as they reach their different quality thresholds, and also pre-K partnerships. When we look across the workforce boards, we see communities making different choices, investing in Texas Rising Star mentors, professional development, curriculum, infant toddler supports, family engagement, et cetera. The variation isn't necessarily the problem. It's actually one of the reasons why local governance matters. But we want to raise an important question as we rethink governance. What should be decided at the state level and what needs to be decided at the local level? We need statewide expectations, common measures of success, and clear accountability. But within that framework, communities need the flexibility to respond to their community's needs and their community's circumstances. We do not need 20, and we're using 28 because there's 28 local workforce boards. We know there's many other different variations as your map indicates. We don't need 28 different systems with 28 different definitions of success, but neither should one statewide strategy assume that every Texas community has the same needs. The opportunity to create a system that is coordinated statewide, accountable statewide, but responsive locally is what we're looking for. That balance is essential consideration as you look to the future of early childhood governance in Texas. Thank you for your time.
Jill Goodrich.
Hi there. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Jill Goodrich. I'm the Executive Director of Opportunity School in Amarillo, so I'm up in the Panhandle. I've been in this role for 15 years. Next week's my 15th anniversary. So I just want to open by saying I'm more encouraged today than I have been in the last 15 years. So thank you for the work that you're doing. Opportunity School is a nationally accredited nonprofit providing high quality early childhood education, home visiting, family support services, and community partnerships for low-income working families in Amarillo. I also serve on the Panhandle Workforce Development Board and the Child Care Advisory Committee. Beyond these roles, I'm the mother of 4 children, and I've experienced firsthand the challenges that working parents have in finding and affording childcare. I'm wearing all of those hats today. My primary message is simple, and that is the fragmentation and that you've all talked about this morning is amplified when it gets to the local level for both families and providers. Families don't experience services as separate programs. It's one family, different needs, one or more children. Yet they have to navigate all of these multiple agencies, eligibility requirements, reporting systems, technology platforms that often don't work together. And the result is confusion, delays, repetitive applications, and significant cost and administrative burden for both families and providers. As a provider, we work across numerous of these agencies, from workforce child care services, child care regulation, public pre-K services, early childhood intervention, Head Start, early Head Start, CACFP nutrition programs, and other services. Each is important. Each serves a different family need, but the lack of coordination often causes barriers for families to get the services that they need. One example is child care scholarships. In the last year, Opportunity School has given more than $125,000. I looked up the number last night again, $125,000 in direct tuition assistance and childcare assistance to families that are on the wait list, that have jobs waiting for them, but can't go to work because they don't have childcare. When childcare is delayed, then those positions in our communities don't get filled. As a workforce board member, I have seen firsthand the ongoing confusion about local authority, state authority, accountability, within our childcare system. So I think we have a real opportunity in the state of Texas to be bold and to do something about that. We can do this. As a mom, I know how important it is that families navigate this system and to have quality and care for their children. I don't see it as one of or the other. I think it can be both and. And as a provider, I work with families every day that are getting lost in this system. And as a board member, I just think we have a tremendous opportunity to do this differently and do it better. So thank you for your time. And I just want to join you in the work that we're all doing to support Texans. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, any questions?
Cassandra Duran.
Good morning. My name is Cassandra Duran. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm originally from El Paso, Texas, and moved to Dallas in 2017. As a single parent without familiar support and essentially starting from scratch, one of my biggest concerns was whether I would be able to find childcare that I could both trust and afford. I needed help to understand the system and figure out what program was right for my family. Having access to subsidized programs in my area gave me the stability I needed during a time when I truly needed it, especially the childcare. It allowed me to continue working, focus on my career, and pursue opportunities for advancement without having to sacrifice the quality of care and services my family and I received. I was lucky to find a free program so that I could go to work and focus on my career. With the stability and support, I was able to set goals for myself and work toward a better future for my family. While my daughter directly received the care, my son was also able to experience the benefits of being a part of the child care group. He would read to my daughter, and as a family, we enjoyed sharing our favorite stories. And instead of juggling multiple jobs, I was able to invest in a career and have since been promoted multiple times at work. This allowed me to be more present in any and all extracurricular activities for my children. Today, I'm proud to say that I'm self-sufficient. I have a career, I'm a homeowner, and I have the ability to provide for my family. But I also know that I could not have achieved these goals without having access to stable, affordable childcare, and most importantly, the encouragement of the child care group staff to help me keep going. My daughter is self-confident and doing well in school where she's enrolled in a dual language program. And my son has started his first year in college studying biology. My story is just one example. There are so many Texas parents like me who are working hard to build their better lives for their families. And so many children who can benefit when their parents have access to the support they need to become independent. We don't just need programs that help families get by. We need programs that give families the opportunity to move forward. That is why I'm here today in support of expanding access to subsidized childcare across Texas so more parents can work, grow in their careers, achieve their goals, and build a stronger future for their families. I am proud of where we started and where we are today, thanks to the child care group for being available and playing such a pivotal role in our lives. Thank you.
Tori Manis.
Good morning, task force members. My name is Tori Manis. I'm president and CEO of Child Care Group. We are a Dallas-based nonprofit that provides Head Start and early Head Start and home visiting services. We service pre-K partners to 6 area ISDs. We administer child care financial scholarships across 3 workforce board areas, and we help early childhood providers improve their quality in their programs across Texas. As you consider how Texas can better coordinate our early childhood programs across multiple state agencies and funding streams, I urge you to consider one essential question. What does this system feel like to a parent that is trying to help their child succeed? Organizations like ours have learned over the years how to navigate the complexities of our state systems. Families should not have to. We know that our work is never just about educating young children. A parent may come to us needing childcare that fits their income level, their work schedule, or their family values, or that offers a developmental service for children with special needs. They may also need support returning to school or securing better employment. Those needs do not show up one by one. They arrive together in one family. That's why Child Care Group uses a two-generation approach. We educate young children while also helping families to build stability, skills, and resources their families need to thrive. With family advocates and Help Me Grow navigators, we're able to connect families with parenting and nutrition programs, family goal setting, job training, post-secondary education, and other resources in our communities. A child's readiness for school and a parent's ability to support their child are not separate outcomes. They are part of the same success story. You heard from Cassandra Duran, one of our parents. She's a tremendous success story. When her daughter Ziania enrolled in the Early Head Start program, it allowed Cassandra to get a job and then to get a better job. She was able to set goals to become a homeowner, to stabilize her family. And now, because of her involvement, she was elected to our agency's Board of Trustees. There are over 2.2 million Texas children under 6 and thousands of families just like Cassandra's who could benefit from a more coordinated and family-centered system. As you develop your recommendations, please ensure that stronger state governance also strengthens local navigation, family voice, and the connections between services and children and services for parents. When we get that right, we don't just improve programs, we change the trajectory for children, families, and ultimately the future workforce and the economy of Texas. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes public testimony. We're very appreciative of your time and energy and your thoughts and comments to the group. We take it seriously, so thank you very much. We're going to break now for lunch. We will reconvene at 12:20 for executive session where we will review both what we went through in our working session that we sent out around key programs and what we've learned from other states from a consolidation and governance standpoint and any other major areas we need to cover. So 12:20. Thank you. And lunches, do you know where we're?
Your report room. So, for the front of the building, I'll be the left hand side.
Great, thank you.
Were you?